When I first laid eyes on the listing of this house, I knew it was the one for me. It wasn't too extravagant by any means, but for a bachelor that spends far too much of his time working, it was perfect. It was your average run-of-the-mill suburban house, nestled between two others at the center of a small cul-de-sac. The exterior was a muddled eggshell white color. A rather tall oak tree loomed in the back of the house. During my walkthrough of the house, I was becoming more and more attached to it with each room I inspected. The living room wasn't terribly spacious, but it was enough for a couch and a decent-sized television. The kitchen was actually slightly larger than the living room, which had been completely remodeled from the ground up. Down a narrow hallway led to the two bedrooms, as well as a bathroom tucked in between them. The master bedroom's larger size more than made up for the lack of a third bedroom, while the second bedroom, albeit much smaller than the master, was perfect for an office, which is precisely what I turned it into. You see, I'm a writer by profession, and I needed a house that had an extra room such as this. Near the kitchen was a door that led into the house's basement. The basement wasn't much to look at. It wasn't terribly large, and I thought it was more akin to a storage unit rather than a full-on basement. After examining the entirety of the house, I told the realtor that I wanted it. She gave out an audible sigh of relief as she jotted down some notes. Under her breath, she made a rather odd statement. "Hope it sticks," she said. I could tell she didn't mean to express that out loud when I inquired as to what she meant. She looked concerned, as if I was going to back out due to that remark. She mentioned that the house had been on the market very frequently over the past few years. She told me families would move in, live here for about a year, and then move out. Every time she would ask them, or her realty company, about it, they'd just say it wasn't a good fit. She hastily mentioned that she didn't mean anything negative by her remark, that she just wanted to see a good home go to a good person and for them to be happy for a long time. I reassured her that she hadn't dissuaded me in the slightest. It's been about a year and a half since I had moved into the house. I've got to say, I still felt the same about it as I did on that first walkthrough all those months ago. Well, that was until a few days ago. I spend quite a lot of my time cooped up in my office typing away on my keyboard. I'm very particular when it comes to my work. I can't have any noise while I'm writing. I mean it. I need absolute silence so I can focus. I have some friends who can work or play video games while listening to music full blast, but not me. The first night while I was writing, I was jolted from my keyboard by a random noise. The noise sounded like a large door being closed somewhere in my house. This made me extremely nervous sitting there in my office, as I thought someone had broken in. I quickly stood from my chair and looked around for any type of weapon I could use. The only thing I had readily available was a small stool near my desk. I grabbed it and hoisted it up as I walked over to my door. I cracked the door open and peeked out into the dark, narrow hallway. I couldn't seem to hear anything, which might have put some people at ease, but only seemed to increase my heart rate. Someone could be creeping around inside my house, trying to be as quiet as possible, I thought. I cautiously wandered out into the hallway and rounded the corner to my living room area. I flicked the nearby light switch, and as the bulbs illuminated, I hollered a feeble war cry, ready to bash the would-be intruders with my stool. The living room was empty. I lowered the stool and went around my entire house, turning on all the lights while examining each room. My entire house was completely empty, though there wasn't any doubt in my mind regarding what I had heard. After taking a moment to think, my eyes landed upon my basement door. How original, I thought as I walked over to it. I gingerly opened the basement door, still a bit apprehensive. I quickly flipped the switch inside the doorway, bathing the basement with a dull yellow light. I called out to the seemingly empty basement. "The police are on their way. You better show yourself." Silence only answered my bluff as I stared down the steps. I sighed as I lifted my stool once again and trekked down to the basement. As I rounded the stairs at the bottom, I could see the multitude of boxes and other bins I had brought down here for storage. I looked around for a few moments, shuffling and peeking around boxes. After finding no sign of anyone, my mind finally began to relax. I turned to walk back towards the stairs, and when I did, I felt the ground below me bend under my weight, and the creaking of wood whined slightly. I looked down and found myself standing upon a wooden trap door. I was stunned and confused. Even though it had been over a year, I still remember the walkthrough and bringing down multiple rounds of boxes to this basement very clearly. This trap door wasn't here before. Even though I felt a wave of anxiety building within me, I also felt a strange curiosity mounting as well. I leaned down and grabbed the worn metal latch. With a heavy clang, the door came free and I lifted it open. The glow from the light bulb overhead only barely extended below the hidden door's entrance. I could see a small wooden ladder of sorts, seemingly fixed to the wall inside. I walked over to a tool chest a friend had gifted me earlier in my life and found a flashlight inside. After wrapping the light on my hands a few times, the bulb ignited and a beam shot down into the abyss. I tried to angle the light and my gaze to see if I could spy anything interesting, but it was still too dark. I wanted to leave it be, but that ever-growing curiosity in my mind wouldn't let me just walk away. I climbed down the ladder, swearing to myself that I would just take a peek, then climb back up. I began to descend, and after climbing for a few seconds, my feet plunged into ankle-deep water. I groaned as I thought about all the disgusting things that could be residing here. I shined my light around me, and quickly realized that I was now standing in a tunnel of sorts. Although my flashlight was a decent model, it still wasn't strong enough to penetrate more than a few feet away. Satisfied with my investigation, I reached for the ladder. Panic killed the curiosity in my mind as my hand rested upon a solid brick wall. The wooden slats were nowhere to be found. I quickly aimed my flashlight upwards, and the hatch that was once above me was gone. I was on the verge of hyperventilating. I looked back and forth rapidly in both directions, trying to decide on what to do. Then I heard something. A light splash followed by the sound of dripping water echoed down the corridor. I felt my hands began to tremble as I tried in vain to steady the flashlight. A second splash sounded, then a third, followed by a fourth. The sounds were growing closer, though I still couldn't discern from which direction. Then, as I frantically waved my flashlight back and forth, the light reflected off something in the distance. Two orbs lit up in the encompassing darkness. I knew they were eyes, but something seemed off about them. They were perfectly round, like two shining marbles suspended in the air. I couldn't see what they were attached to, but I knew I didn't want to find out. They seemed to bob up and down with each splash, yet they never blinked. It was coming closer. I was about to make a run for it when I felt my shirt sleeve get caught on something next to me. I turned and saw that the wooden slats had come back. A grin appeared on my face as I grabbed onto the first slat. Then, I felt a gust of warm air brush the side of my face. Right next to me, in my peripheral vision, were those two round eyes I had seen. It had somehow closed that massive gap between us in only a few short seconds. I instinctively shut my eyes and started to climb, dropping my flashlight in the process. I thought for sure whatever it was would grab me, kill me, and eat me, but nothing happened. I scrambled out of the hatch and onto the basement floor. I slammed the hatch shut, ran upstairs, and closed the door behind me. After barricading the door, I sat in my room all night, too frightened to move. Hours passed and I must have fallen asleep huddled next to the wall. The next morning, after the sun had come up, I mustered enough courage to investigate the basement once again. Only this time, when I reached the bottom of the steps, that trap door was nowhere to be found. I thought maybe I had gotten tired while writing that night, went to bed, and just had an intensely vivid nightmare. That was until I went back down into the basement one more time just to be sure. Sitting there, in the same exact spot as where the trapdoor had once resided, was the flashlight I had dropped in the commotion. It was still slick with the water from that tunnel. And right next to it, on the cold concrete floor, was the largest handprint I had ever seen. I have no idea how to explain any of this, but I think I'm starting to understand why this house wasn't a very good fit for all those previous residents.